Horror has really been in a renaissance in the last several years. Some of my favorite horror films of all time have come out during this time, including The Witch, Ready or Not, X, Midsommar, and of course, especially Hereditary. I haven't talked much about Hereditary since 2018, but if you've seen my top 10 movies of 2018 video, you'll know that Hereditary was my number 2 movie of that year, and it scared the shit out of me, and I loved it. Anyway, these movies took relatively normal concepts for horror like cults, slashers, dark comedy.
We're all dead.
Founder.
Psychological thrillers, family drama.
You never raise your voice at me! I am your mother!
Atmospheric horror. And more, and found new, intuitive ways to reinvent and breathe new life into those concepts. And the movie I'm going to talk about today definitely deserves to be added to that list. Hi, I'm Anthony from Awesome Anthony Productions, and today I'm going to talk to you about Scott Derrickson's latest gritty, procedural, supernatural thriller, The Black Phone. Before we get started, please do me a favor and subscribe, and make sure you ring the bell to be notified whenever I post again. I usually try to post at least one review a week. Alright, let's get into it. The Black Phone follows Finney, a breakout role perfectly portrayed by Mason Thames. He lives with his sister and their alcoholic single father, who ends up being an unflinchingly real and kind of disturbing portrayal of parental abuse. The film is set in the 70s, where satanic panic, domestic terror, and fear of stranger danger were at an all-time high. These themes aren't quite as relevant in today's day of social media and smartphones and summoning random strangers from the internet and getting into their car, but the movie smartly doesn't really play too much into that aspect. Instead, it focuses on a real fear that almost every parent has. I'm not a parent yet, but I mean, it's not hard to understand that a parent would be terrified if what happened in this movie happened to their child. And the movie plays smartly into those relatable fears with the villain. The grabber, played by Ethan Hawke, is not in the movie as much as the marketing may lead you to believe, but he has enough of a menacing and completely unpredictable presence to where he really didn't need that much screen time to make an impact. But I'll talk more about him later. So the film really kicks into true horror when Finney is taken by the grabber and locked in his soundproof basement with no hope of escape. Just a mysterious, disconnected black phone in the wall that keeps ringing. When Finney answers it, he realizes that he can talk to the ghosts of the grabber's past victims, who give him the confidence to try and escape. But will he? We've seen horror films like this where our young lead is held captive. Movies like Split or 10 Cloverfield Lane. Both great movies, but movies that were more so built on the strength of their cast, not necessarily the strength of the story. Here, we get great performances, especially from Mason Thames and Ethan Hawke, but we also get an extra element to really add some emotional and narrative weight to the story. Once the phone rings and Finney starts talking to the grabber's previous victims, you realize that this movie isn't about the grabber, hence why his screen time is somewhat limited. It doesn't want to glorify or present him in too sympathetic of a light because he's a monster. Instead, they chose to keep his role limited to focus on the real important things in these kinds of cases, the lives of the children that get attacked, abducted, and eventually, through Finney's talks with these kids and through some flashbacks, we really get to understand and know each of the kids that were killed by the grabber, reminding the audience that they were real kids with real lives and real families, not just another body to be added to the body count and needlessly killed so that the movie can have some blood and gore and shock value. That kind of reminds me, this isn't really that violent of a film outside of a few instances. Most of the horrible stuff is implied rather than shown. Anyway, each of the sequences about these victims just serve to add even more development to the story and further empower Mason Thames' Finney. You see, from the first act, we learn that Finney is a quiet, bullied kid who would much rather run and hide than actually stick up and defend himself. We see this in a few scenes of bullying that are actually pretty disturbing and violent, with how brutal these kids beat up on each other. But I honestly think that takes the film a step further in grounding it in reality. Before the world was so against it, bullying was everywhere, and it could get pretty brutal, while also giving us some pretty important insight into Finney's character. And this is also accentuated by just how much of a monster his father is. Once Finney is captured and starts looking for a way out and conversing with the ghosts, we see every bit of his character start to come through. In his face, in his pained dialogue, in his determination, in the way he holds back his tears, as if out of habit that he had to learn to protect himself from his father. He's complex and layered, with a calm outer demeanor masking a terrified inside that's willing to do whatever it takes to survive. Mason Thames is an incredibly talented young actor, and I'm really looking forward to seeing him in more projects. Before I get to Ethan Hawke's grabber, the other standout of the film is Finney's sister Gwen, played by Madeline McGraw. I won't spoil too much about her story or her significance to the plot, but I will say she has a pretty important role to play. She's also hilarious. She adds a lot of humor to the movie, especially in her interactions with the detectives that are on the grabber's case. And she also gets some genuinely heartfelt and heartbreaking scenes when she's worried worrying, researching, or searching for her brother. Her friendship with her brother also brings a lot of heart to the film, especially when they're bonding over the shared abuse from their father, played by a truly depressing Jeremy Davies. Speaking of that, I will say that there's one or two scenes of some pretty intense and realistic physical and emotional child abuse. So if that's going to be a trigger for you and you can't take that, you might want to skip this one. Even though he's an abusive asshole, this film isn't just satisfied with making Jeremy Davies' character a stereotypical abusive father that we'd find in like a Stephen King movie or something. Yes, he's abusive and he is an alcoholic, but as the film goes on and he gets a bit more developed, we find out that he does have a reason for all of his behavior. It's not a justification, especially not for the way he treats his children, but the character at least grows and gets some strong development throughout the film. That brings us to the final standout character in The Black Phone, Ethan Hawke as the grabber. Like I said, he's only in a handful of scenes, but when he is, wow, is he completely menacing and unpredictable.
Like you, Finney. I almost let you go.
The way Ethan Hawke shifts between a childlike personality that just kind of wants to bond with Finney and learn more about him, and an unstable, booming intimidator threatening him is truly terrifying. And you really never quite know what he's going to do next. This really also adds to his villainous character too. Though his motivations and true identity are kept ambiguous and never really revealed to the audience, there's enough there throughout his chilling performance, dialogue, and ever-changing mask that suggests a dark, traumatic past and upbringing, and maybe even suggesting that what he's doing to these kids is an uncontrollable urge for him. I mentioned the ever-changing masks because every time that we see him in the film, he has a different mask on, covering different parts of his face. His character honestly draws a lot of parallels between Finney's life and Finney's kidnapping. The constantly shifting personality and the different mask with every appearance really mirrors the nature of his abusive father, who, through his alcoholism and abuse, shows off several different moves throughout the movie, as well as a violent unpredictability. The rest of the cast is all great too, especially the kids that play the grabber's previous victims. They all get a chance to shine and bring a bit of a creep factor, while also not getting too scary and having a chance to bring in even more heart and touching on themes of friendship and love that make the movie honestly pretty endearing and uplifting in some parts. The only character that I felt didn't really belong was James Ransone's character. He has more of an extended cameo than an actual role, but he kind of just felt like some last-minute comedic relief that was thrown in.
You should cut that fucking mullet. It's been like 30 years, man.
His portrayal of a coked-up civilian that's obsessed with this case and trying to figure it out on his own honestly borders on being over the top, and his character's part in the story was the only thing that I saw coming the moment he was introduced. So that was a little disappointing. Besides that though, everything else in this film really fucking works, including Scott Derrickson's grounded and minimalistic direction, the atmospheric creepiness. There's only one or two real jump scares in the movie, and they work really well. The occasional Super 8 and news footage intercut with the movie that gives it a gritty, almost procedural feel, like a documentary or like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Mark Corvin's score with dread-inducing resonant bass, upbeat synths, and even a few 70s hits thrown in there. And finally, the incredibly satisfying finale that hits all the right notes and reaches an emotional head that will leave even the hardest of moviegoers choked up at the end. The Black Phone is easily one of the best horror films I've seen all year, and I wholeheartedly recommend it. I already can't wait to see it again. Thank you so much for watching another Awesome Anthony review. Please help me make an offer to the algorithm gods and give this video a like and a comment. And while you're at it, you might as well subscribe and hit the bell icon to be notified whenever I post another review. And if you want to, go ahead and check out these screens right here. They'll take you to my channel, my latest video, and even my playlist of movie reviews. Thanks for watching. I'll see you on the next review.